I'm Mark Golub, and we're at a new stage of election 2016 as all the drama in both parties seems to be over. We now have our two major candidates for President of the United States. Donald Trump, who won 5 uncontested primaries on June 7th, should be the Republican nominee. And Hillary Clinton, who celebrated her becoming the first woman to receive a major party nomination for president, should be the Democratic standard bearer. It will be Clinton versus Trump, and most people are predicting one of two things or both: a knockdown, roll-in-the-mud brawl and or a runaway victory for Hillary Clinton, with Donald Trump not winning a single state in the November election. So how's it all shaping up from an American Jewish perspective? For some answers, I'm pleased to be speaking once again to one of American Jewry's most thoughtful journalists, Rob Eshman, publisher and editor-in-chief of Tribe Media's Jewish Journal of Los Angeles. He's on our phones from Los Angeles. Rob, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Rob, first of all, I want to begin with your own piece that you wrote last night with Bernie. So you were with the Sanders campaign, I think in Santa Monica, and he got whooped pretty bad by Hillary Clinton on June 7th. But you write about his appearance before the crowd. And you've got to tell me if I've got this wrong. The suggestion I feel coming from your piece is you expected Bernie Sanders to acknowledge that the race, in effect, was over for him and that Hillary Clinton now was the nominee of the Democratic Party. And lo and behold, he didn't do that. Tell me what you experienced, and, have I read your piece correctly?
Well, sort of. He lost by something like 13 points, I think, which is a pretty big margin of defeat. You wouldn't have known it if you were in the room. You would have thought that he beat her by 13 points. Yes. There was a lot of enthusiasm in the crowd. A campaign manager who was there, not a Bernie campaign manager, but somebody who's experienced in these things, told me that it was like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, that Bernie was in denial and the crowd was in the anger stage of grief. And so nobody was really coming to terms with it. I didn't expect him, it's not for me to say whether he should or shouldn't have acknowledged it. I thought he should have remarked on the fact that, Hillary was the first woman to win a major party nomination. I think that was a historic first, as much as Obama was the first African-American. It seemed like he should have mentioned something about that, but he avoided the whole thing. He really just focused on beating Donald Trump. His one small mention in congratulating Hillary for the victory in California was met with a chorus of boos.
Mm-hmm. By the way, my sense is Bernie does not yet believe Hillary Clinton has, in fact, won the Democratic nomination, and that's why he's not going to congratulate her.
From what you read in the national press, and I haven't talked to Bernie Sanders, he's under the impression that there's still a small chance or
right.
Some chance
yes.
that the email controversy will take her down and that he'll be left standing.
Mm-hmm. By the way, do you feel it is now a done deal that he has no chance? He probably had no chance before California, but with his losing California, he absolutely has no chance now of unseating her and winning enough of the unpledged superdelegates to take the nomination away from her. That's how I see it, and you see it as how?
Well, there's an excellent story on Politico right now that uses as a source, or as several sources, people inside Bernie Sanders' campaign who are saying that this is really Bernie being unable to face reality, even though people within his campaign at the higher levels would like him to figure out an exit strategy.
Mm-hmm. I've spoken to many Jewish Democrats who've told me that they're uncomfortable with Hillary Clinton and they're excited by Bernie Sanders. I don't know if the same thing is true out on the West Coast, but the enthusiasm that Bernie Sanders generated throughout this primary season has also captured the imagination of many American Jews. What are you hearing from inside the Jewish community about their feelings about Bernie Sanders?
There's a generational split for sure. I find that millennial Jews, younger Jews, tend to be more pro-Bernie, and also kind of an older 60s kind of Jewish activist tends to be more pro-Bernie. And I saw a lot of them at this event last night. There must have been 1,000 people crowded into an airport hangar in Santa Monica, and I recognized a lot of them. But if you look at the numbers, it looks like the Jews, in terms of actual votes, are overwhelmingly going for Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And that's what it looks like in the New York primary, where if you, even though they didn't do exit polling of the Jews themselves, in the heavily Jewish areas of New York, Manhattan, and other parts, the vote for Hillary was overwhelming.
Yes, she did very well, right.
And I think you're going to find the same in Los Angeles and California as well. Mm-hmm. I think that, look, people like Bernie. They think it's amazing that a Jewish American has gotten so far in a major presidential, as a major presidential candidate. But I think they find Hillary to be more electable and more pragmatic, and Jews tend to vote pragmatically.
Mm-hmm. All right. You know, Rob, one of the peculiarities of the upcoming presidential race is that both candidates have high unfavorable numbers. According to Real Clear Politics' average of polls, Donald Trump has an unfavorable rating of 58%. At the same time, Hillary Clinton has virtually as poor a rating in Real Clear Politics, with a 56 unfavorables. So neither candidate has thus far been able to gain the confidence of a majority of Americans. So my question for you is, to what degree do you think this same negativity is reflected inside the Jewish community?
I don't. Well, I think with Trump, the negative ratings are higher than 60% among Jews, and with Hillary, I think they're lower. I think partly because Jews tend to vote Democrat, so she's a Democrat. I think people prefer, people like Hillary. Jews really came out for Clinton, for Bill Clinton. I think, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think they did vote for Hillary mostly in the 2008. So there's not a lot of antipathy towards Hillary in the Jewish community. With Trump, on the other hand, you find a lot of Republican Jews defecting from the Trump camp, or never entering it. Other than, I think the highest profile ones are Sheldon Adelson and maybe Ari Fleischer, but otherwise, people like Brett Stevens, people like William Kristol, neocon Jews who have been stalwart in the Republican movement for a while now, have said never Trump.
Is Kristol Jewish?
Bill Kristol?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I've learned something new about Jewish Republicans. Very, very interesting. At the same time, I read the same things. I hear the same things. Brett Stevens, who I have enormous regard for, boy, he thinks Trump would be the worst thing this country could ever do, and he wants Trump to win. He wants Trump to lose every single state in the Electoral College this November.
Yeah, Brett Stevens is no bleeding heart liberal.
No. At the same time, I want to say to you again, I meet lovely, intelligent, thoughtful Jews who tell me that they are very, very, very disenchanted with the presidency of Barack Obama. Very often they have been lifelong Democrats. They are not happy with Hillary at all. And they tell me with unabashed forthrightness, they're going to vote for Donald Trump. Now, this is before the last 2 weeks where Trump has run into a buzzsaw over the comments he made about the judge who was hearing his case in Trump University. But until then, and I don't know what's going to happen now, Rob, I meet Jews all the time, and I meet non-Jews all the time, who tell me they're going to vote for Donald Trump. Are you saying you have not experienced what I've experienced?
No, you and I must be hanging out in different bars. I find that, you're going to find all sorts of Jews out there. But when you look at the actual numbers, look, Jews voted for Obama 80% to 20%, both times he ran. I think the numbers were a little less the second time, but still a huge majority. So Obama's a popular figure among most Jews. And I think that his popularity has somewhat returned. It took a nosedive maybe in the middle of his second term, but it somewhat bounced back. So, I think Hillary's going to be the beneficiary of that. And we haven't seen the full election take place yet. Obama's going to go out on the stump and really work for Hillary. I think Sanders ultimately is going to go out and work for Hillary. And that's going to do a lot to shore up her popularity, especially among Jews.
Yes. By the way, what you say our audience should hear very carefully. And we all know that traditionally 70% and more of American Jews vote Democratic in national elections. My instinct is that if Trump rehabilitates himself between now and the November election, the number will go down in the Jewish community for the Democratic nominee. I do not expect Hillary to have the same number of American Jews voting for her that voted for Barack Obama. And it's not about bars. I don't ever go to a bar, Rob.
I'm kidding.
But I know that was a euphemism. But the reality is, I do think I am trying to go a cross-section of the entire Jewish community I run across, and I don't feel that I'm meeting dark, closeted Jews who tell me that they do not like Barack Obama, especially those, Rob, who feel that on the diplomatic front vis-a-vis Israel, Barack Obama let the Jewish state down, or the Jewish community down, and they just don't want a third term of Barack Obama with Hillary Clinton. And so what I'll say it again, I keep meeting. I'm not talking about, lunatics. I'm talking about very solid Jews who care deeply about the state of Israel, who have been Democrats before, and who say that they simply now are going to vote for Trump. Whether that's a significant number or not, I'm not sure. But I do think...
My experience is very different, and my read of the numbers, the polling numbers, is very different. I was at an event, I covered an event for Hillary, Jewish Americans for Hillary event in Beverly Hills last week, and it was packed with pretty mainstream Jews and a lot of younger Jews who you would think would be naturally Bernie people, but who really want to see Trump defeated, and they think Hillary has the best chance of that. So I just haven't seen that. I think that they see Hillary is a different character than Obama, the ones who don't like Obama. And don't forget, the other factor here is Bill Clinton, who retains enormous popularity among Jews.
Okay. I believe you 100% that the Jews you are talking to and experiencing who tend to lean Democrat have decided for one reason or another they're not going to vote for Trump. And it'll be interesting to me to see whether in the next few months you run into the same kind of people I'm running into all the time. What do you?
The other thing I'm saying is that I'm also running into a lot of Republican Jews, people I know who have been stalwarts of the Republican Jewish coalition, and even office holders in the Republican Jewish coalition. One of them, Dr. Joel Geideman, wrote an op-ed for our paper saying that he wouldn't vote for Trump. Dan Senor, who's probably one of the most prominent anti-Trump voices, was also one of the most prominent pro-Republican Jews. So what I'm seeing is if defection is going on, it's going among Jews. It's going away from the Republican Party if they stick with Trump.
Okay. We will see, by the way, in November, which of us has experienced the more accurate demographics here. You believe that ultimately Clinton is going to benefit from the Trump candidacy, and I'm suggesting...
Among Jews.
What?
Among Jews.
Among Jews.
Yeah.
And that I'm saying that I think that the Jewish Democrats will vote in smaller numbers for her than they did for Barack Obama. We'll have to see. What do you hear, by the way, from Jewish leadership itself? And again, we're going to begin with the Jewish Democrats. Are Jewish Democratic leaders enthusiastic about Hillary?
Yeah, I mean, most of them have known her now for decades, and like her, the ones who've met her. The ones who haven't met her are maybe a little cooler on her because she doesn't come off as well in the media. But they like what she stands for. They like her policies. They like the way she's comporting herself. Hillary is relatively popular. I don't think they, Is she getting people really excited? I mean, do you see the lawn signs and the bumper stickers and the big rallies like you did for Obama? No, she's not getting people really excited. But I think that, again, the Trump factor is going to make up for the lack of enthusiasm because people are really, really scared of him.
Interesting. But by the way, I should ask you this as an aside. Do you think the election is going to be close, or do you think Trump's just going to be killed?
I have no idea. The poll, the poll that was released today, I think we quoted it on Jewish Insider, we tweeted it on Jewish Insider, showed Hillary ahead of Trump in a national poll by 1%, which would be within the margin of error. So right now, I'd say it looks like it's going to be very close, and I think Trump is a brilliant natural politician, and I wouldn't say. I feel pretty confident about my predictions on the Jewish vote, but I don't really get America.
Okay, very fair. So what about the Jewish Republicans? And you've already referenced Sheldon Adelson, and even on your page, you have a title under Adelson and Trump. Talk to me about what you wrote about in terms of Adelson and Trump, and then in general, what do you hear from Jewish Republican leaders about the candidacy of Donald Trump? But begin with Adelson for me.
Right. Well, in my column, which is an opinion column essentially, I took Adelson to task because if his avowed interest, number one interest is Israel, you have to question whether somebody like Trump, who really doesn't have a coherent foreign policy, doesn't have a coherent economic policy, has made some huge blunders, in speaking about foreign policy and in talking about our allies. You have to wonder if that, in the long run, even though he says he's pro-Israel, if he really means it, because who knows what he believes, is what I'm hearing from people. And also, does he have the competence to really run America right? And I quoted David Ben-Gurion, who told John Kennedy, when Kennedy asked Ben-Gurion, how could I be a good president for Israel? And Ben-Gurion said, be a good president for America.
Yes.
So, that was my quote. And whether you're voting for someone who's going to harm America, it's not going to help Israel. And the second part of that is the way Trump has alienated the Hispanic voters and minority voters and Muslim voters and really threatened civil liberties in America. To publicly support him as kind of a major Jewish American figure like Adelson, I think doesn't reflect well among our likely allies in this country. So I thought it was more, I thought it could be harmful. In general, I'm finding that Adelson's in the minority, that most Republican Jews, as I said, don't like Trump, and that many have signed on to the Never Trump movement. Whether that changes, who knows?
Okay. Incidentally, as a journalist yourself, how objective do you believe the mainstream American media has been in its coverage of both candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump?
I don't even know what the mainstream media is anymore. I mean, so few people watch evening news, which used to be considered mainstream media.
You're talking about network.
Network news.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a small, old demographic. What is mainstream? Is Huffington Post mainstream media? Is it? I think when people say mainstream media, I think they only mean the New York Times.
They also mean CNN.
Okay, CNN.
And they mean Fox. They mean MSNBC. They're still going to the major cable news networks.
MSNBC has a minuscule number of viewers.
That's correct, it does.
A lot of other sources.
Right.
So CNN, I think, has been really the Trump news network. I think from the very beginning, they realized he was ratings gold, and they've way overcovered him in comparison to the other candidates.
By the way, I'm surprised, because whenever I see CNN, whether they're covering him or not, they're very critical of him, Rob.
Well, I don't know about critical. They cover the kinds of things he does, but I think all that coverage is coverage they're taking away from other candidates. In other words, they know that as long as they have a camera pointed at Trump, they're going to get viewers, and Trump knows that as long as the camera's pointed at him, it's not pointed at the people running against him. So I think there's been sort of a mutual appreciation pact, not formal, nothing. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy, but I think it's worked out well for both of them. The New York Times, I'm a big New York Times fan, so I guess somebody could point to elements of bias in their coverage, but I tend to read it and think that there's really no better paper out there for covering national politics.
Very interesting. Again, different bars. I hear a lot of American Jews very, very critical now of the New York Times. I know Jews who've canceled their subscriptions to the Times. And,
Me too.
You too?
No, I didn't cancel. I know
No,
Jews
you've heard of it. Yeah.
who've canceled their subscriptions to that, to the LA Times, to the Washington Post, but I don't know what they're reading.
Okay. Anyway.
Maybe the Jewish Journal.
A superb publication, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, look, I think there are many legitimate things to criticize about Donald Trump's candidacy, and you mentioned a few of them a moment ago. But I find that the overwhelming criticism tends to be ad hominem, which you did not do, and more a function of his not being liked and not being taken seriously, which he never was from the moment he declared his candidacy. And yet it's so patently clear that Donald Trump represents a disdain for the political establishment of America. And again, so many decent, good people, again, including decent, good Jews, are very much pro-Trump, and they see him as a welcome breath of fresh air. And I personally, Rob, am let me just finish for 1 second.
Yeah.
I am disappointed. I'm not surprised, but I am very disappointed in the emotional reporting that I see in what I experience as the mainstream media. And when you talk about the Times, a perfect example was this Times story, a hatchet piece on Trump on its front page, above the fold, claiming he did inappropriate things years and years ago by what he said, how he treated women, especially in the Miss Universe pageant, only to have the contestants respond to the Times piece by saying they never said the things the Times portrayed them as saying. And what it did was it undermined the credibility of the New York Times. And that is what bothers me. And again, I'll say this again. There are so many legitimate things to say about Donald Trump, and by the way, also Hillary Clinton, that I don't understand why it has to be emotional ad hominem comments coming out of the mainstream media, what I consider to be the mainstream media. And I interrupted you. You wanted to say what?
I would agree with you on that particular story, and I think every paper is going to have stories that ultimately you look back on them and they weren't the best example of what the paper does. And I thought that story was weak. I really did. But I think overall it's really Trump who's been Trump's worst representative. I mean, for me, when you call for a ban on a group of people because of their religion across the board, you've crossed a line in American politics and American policy that I don't think, as a Jew, as a member of a minority, you ever want to see crossed. When you call a group like Mexicans, you lump them into one group as racist, or you call for a wall to keep out you're doing things which ultimately, I think, undermine the values that Jews have really looked to America to uphold. And I think for those things, he's really crossed the line. Look, if he walks those back, then I think a lot of his other stuff, is in some ways less conservative, in many ways less conservative, more socially liberal than the Republican Party has been in decades.
Yes.
And I kind of welcome that.
Yes, but I don't believe he's a conservative. I don't believe he's a Republican. He's a guy who wanted to run for president. He chose the Republican Party to do so. Incidentally, I understand the comment about how upsetting it was to many people that he called for a ban on Muslims. By the way, he didn't mean it in terms of religion. Everybody understood what he meant. He did it in the wake of San Bernardino, and he was trying to say we want to keep people who might kill us out of the country. He said it in a very poor way. It wasn't about religion. But when you say that Trump has said that all Mexicans are rapists or whatever, that he has lumped Mexicans together as a group, that's just not true, and it's not fair. And again, some of the things you said are so on target and so on point. Then there are also these sweeping criticisms of Trump which offend me intellectually, because what he said was that Mexico sends over illegal immigrants, and inside them are rapists and murderers, which, by the way, is factually true. He never said that all Mexicans are anything. And so I always am surprised when thoughtful Jews just parrot The criticisms of Trump, which are ad hominem and have no substance, I want the criticism to be substance.
I read the same quotes that I read what he said just like you read what he said, and I think there's less room to massage it than you're saying. He said they don't send us their best, they send us their rapists, they send us...
Right. Well, they don't send us their best. He didn't lump them all together.
To learn to use the English language better. I disagree with you about Muslims. He could have said it's not about their religion. He chose to say Muslims.
All right.
I think that for me it's very simple, Mark. It's very simple. Substitute, when people say things like that, we as Jews have to substitute the word Jew for Muslim or Mexican or whatever other slander people are saying. And if we don't like it when Jews are in it, we shouldn't like it when other peoples are mentioned in it. And it's as that simple. And maybe it's too simplistic, but I think that's our best defense to protect our rights and to protect the rights of all Americans.
Okay, and part of the problem for me is Jews never went around killing people. Jews never were part of an international movement to destroy Western civilization. And normally you don't hear about Jews raping and murdering. Are there bad apples? Yes. And this tendency to say, would we ever want to say this against Jews? Of course we wouldn't. But Jews are not in the same category that the Western world is now confronting. And
once we start making religious tests for citizenship or immigration, we're just as liable to be picked on. And in fact, history proves that we're even more liable to be picked on as anybody else. Once you start allowing that, you've undermined American values.
Okay.
And it never happens with the people who are popular. It happens with the people that are unpopular.
Yes.
But eventually comes to bite you in the butt.
Yes. By the way, don't get me wrong. I happen to think it was an inappropriate thing for him to say.
I hope so.
Yeah, I just don't think it. I don't read it as badly as you do. One last question.
He's had many chances to walk it back.
And he has. That's right. And by the way, you know, that's part of his charm. You know.
You call it charm.
I do. Yeah, I do. One more question. National Democratic Party chairperson, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, has received a great deal of criticism for her way that she handled the Democratic primary. And I want to get your take on that. Do you feel in some way the Democratic establishment favored Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary?
I was just reading a commentary on the primary rules just in California, and it is so complicated. The voting rules in general in this country are so complicated, and every 4 years we remember that the system's messed up. So did it favor it, did it not? I'm not a voting expert. I do know that in the interim, between elections, we really need to get our act together on these elections and figure out how to make it simple and clear. That said, there were rules in place. Bernie Sanders knew the rules. Hillary Clinton knew the rules. Nobody's been accused of breaking the rules, but maybe Hillary played by the rules a little better. Okay.
By the way, whether we disagree on a specific point or not, I just think the work you do is fabulous. I love what you write. The Jewish Journal of Los Angeles is terrific, and you're always wonderful to give me some time. I love having your opinion expressed on JBS. I'm going to chase you all the time, Rob. But thank you very much for the time.
Thanks for having me.
You be well.
Bye-bye.
The thoughts of Rob Eshman, publisher and editor-in-chief of Tribe Media's Jewish Journal of Los Angeles. As always, my thanks to Sloan Copeland, our director, production coordinator Serge Goldberg, to the associate director of JBS, Dara Golub, and to the producer of Election 2016, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.